The first thing I noticed, there was a little pink bicycle. It was leaning against the porch of our vacation house. For a second, I smiled. I figured one of the neighbor's kids had left it there. Then I noticed three tiny pairs of rain boots. They were lined up neatly beside our front door, pink, blue, yellow. I stood there holding my overnight bag, staring at them. Daniel and I didn't have children, and no one else was supposed to have a key. I took another step toward the porch. There were chalk drawings across the wooden deck, tiny handprints painted on flower pots, a soccer ball resting against the railing. Someone had been living here, not visiting, living. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Maybe Daniel had rented the house without telling me. Maybe his cousin had borrowed it. There had to be an explanation. There always was. At least, that's what I believed back then. My name is Emily Carter, and until that Friday afternoon, I thought I knew my husband better than anyone else. Daniel and I had been married for 11 years. We weren't the couple constantly posting romantic photos online. We didn't write long anniversary messages. We didn't need to. Our marriage felt steady, comfortable, safe. He brought me coffee every Saturday morning. I reminded him to take his allergy medicine every spring. We argued about little things. Who forgot to buy milk? Whose turn it was to walk the dog? Normal things. Nothing that ever made me question whether he loved me. If someone had asked me to describe Daniel in one word, I would have said, reliable. Looking back, that's the word that hurts the most. The lake house had belonged to Daniel's grandparents. When they passed away, they left it to him. It wasn't fancy, just a small wooden cabin overlooking a quiet lake surrounded by pine trees. No television, spotty phone service. A place where we escaped the noise of the city. Daniel always called it our reset button. Whenever life became stressful, we'd spend a weekend there, cook together, fish from the dock, read books by the fireplace. Some of my happiest memories lived inside those walls. That's why I decided to surprise him. He texted me that morning. Client emergency. Go ahead without me. I'll drive up tomorrow morning. I didn't think twice. His job in commercial construction often pulled him away. I packed the car, bought groceries, even picked up his favorite blueberry pie from the bakery outside town. The whole drive I smiled, thinking about how surprised he'd be when he arrived. I had no idea. I was the one walking into a surprise. I climbed the porch steps and reached into my purse. My key slid into the lock. I turned it. Nothing. I frowned. Maybe I'd grabbed the wrong key. I tried again. Still nothing. The lock had been changed. A strange chill ran through me. Daniel never mentioned replacing it. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again. Then I heard tiny footsteps. The door slowly opened. A little girl stood there. She couldn't have been older than 6. Curly brown hair, big green eyes. She held a stuffed rabbit under one arm. She looked up at me and smiled politely. Oh, you must be Daddy's friend. I blinked. I'm sorry. Before I could say anything else, she turned around and yelled into the house. Mom, Daddy's friend is here. Every muscle in my body went still. A woman appeared in the hallway. She looked to be in her early 30s. She froze the second she saw me. Then I noticed what she was wearing. A blue flannel shirt. Daniel's blue flannel shirt. The one I'd given him for Christmas 3 years earlier, because he'd pointed it out in a store window but refused to buy it for himself. I would have recognized it anywhere. The woman offered a polite smile. Can I help you? I looked at the shirt, then at the little girl, then back at the woman. My voice barely worked. I think you're in the wrong house. Her smile faded. I'm sorry? This house belongs to my husband. She stared at me. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she stepped back from the doorway. I think you should come inside. The moment I walked in, my heart sank. Everything looked familiar. Our couch, our fireplace, the dining table Daniel and I had spent an entire weekend restoring. But it wasn't our home anymore. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A toy train sat beneath the coffee table. A stack of bedtime books rested beside the sofa. It looked lived in, loved, like a family had built a life there. Then my eyes landed on the mantel. Photographs, dozens of them. I walked over slowly. In one picture, Daniel was kneeling beside the little girl, helping her roast marshmallows. In another, he was holding a little boy on his shoulders while both of them laughed at something outside the frame. There was one of all four of them standing on the dock: the woman, the two children, Daniel, smiling, happy, like they belonged together. I picked up the frame with shaking hands. Written across the bottom in black marker were four words: Best Dad Ever. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too unreal. I turned toward the woman. "Who are you?" She swallowed. "My name is Sarah. And you?" I looked around one more time, at the toys, the photographs, the family calendar hanging beside the kitchen, then back at her. "I'm Emily." A pause. "I'm Daniel's wife." The color drained from Sarah's face. She actually took a step backward. "No." She whispered it more to herself than to me. "That's not possible. I've been married to Daniel for 11 years. Sarah slowly shook her head. "I've been with him for 9. Neither of us spoke. The silence was almost unbearable. Then the little girl ran back into the room holding a drawing. "Mom, look what Daddy helped me finish yesterday." Yesterday, Daniel had told me he was staying late at work. Instead, he'd been here. Before I could say another word, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "I miss you already. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." My hands tremble. Sarah's phone buzzed almost at the same moment. She glanced at the screen. Then her face lost every trace of color. Without saying a word, she turned the phone toward me. The message was from Daniel. "Good night, sweetheart. Kiss the kids for me. I'll be home tomorrow afternoon." Neither of us cried. Neither of us yelled. We just looked at each other. Two women standing in the same living room, holding two completely different versions of the same man. Sarah slowly sat down on the couch. She looked at me with tears beginning to form in her eyes. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I think." She looked down at her phone, then back at me. Now one of us has been lied to. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Sarah sat on one end of the couch. I sat on the other. Between us lay two phones, each with a message from the same man, each promising to come home. Just to different homes. I looked around the cabin again, the toys, the drawings, the children's backpacks hanging by the door. None of it looked staged. None of it looked temporary. Someone had built a life here, and somehow I'd never known. Sarah was the first to break the silence. "I think we should call him." I looked down at my phone. Part of me wanted to. I wanted answers. I wanted to hear him panic. I wanted him to explain how 11 years of marriage could fit inside this room. But another part of me, the quieter part, knew something. If we called Daniel now, he'd have time to prepare, to delete things, to invent another story. I slowly shook my head. "No." Sarah frowned. "No. If he's been lying to both of us, I don't want his version first. I want the truth." She stared at me for a second, then nodded. "Okay, so where do we start?" We started with photographs. Sarah brought down 3 large photo albums from the bookshelf. I opened the first one. The earliest picture showed Daniel standing beside Sarah in front of the lake. The little girl looked about 1 year old. There were birthday parties, fishing trips, Christmas mornings, family picnics. Every page looked painfully normal, like the life I'd always imagined we would have someday. I quietly asked, "When did you meet him?" Sarah smiled sadly. "About 9 years ago. He said he'd just moved here for work." I swallowed. 9 years ago. Daniel and I had already been married for 2. I opened my own phone. I'd scrolled back through old photos, anniversaries, weekend trips, holiday dinners. Daniel appeared in almost every picture, smiling, laughing, standing beside me. Sarah leaned closer, then pointed at one image. "When was that?" "Our anniversary." "What year?" I checked the date. She reached for her own phone. A few seconds later, she found a picture taken on the exact same weekend. Daniel stood beside her at a county fair, holding the little girl's hand. We looked at each other. Neither of us needed to say it. He'd celebrated 2 different anniversaries. They're 40 miles apart. Over the next hour, we kept comparing dates. It became almost mechanical. Valentine's Day, Thanksgiving, long weekends, business trips, conference weekends. Every time Daniel disappeared from my life, he appeared in hers. Every time he told Sarah he was traveling for work, he was with me. It wasn't random, it was a schedule, a carefully built routine, almost like he'd been living by two calendars. I opened our shared banking app. Most of the expenses looked familiar: restaurants, gas stations, groceries. Then I noticed something strange. Every few weeks, there was a grocery store charge from the small town near the lake. Daniel always told me he stopped there because it was cheaper than buying supplies in the city. Sarah quietly stood up. She walked to the kitchen, opened the pantry. Every shelf was full. Same grocery store, same logo on the bags. He hadn't been buying supplies for weekend visits. He'd been buying groceries for a family. Sarah suddenly laughed, not because anything was funny, because she was in shock. You know what he always said. I looked up. He hated social media. I blinked. So did mine. She frowned. What do you mean? He said he wanted a private life. Sarah slowly opened Facebook. Her account had only a few pictures. No photos with Daniel. No relationship status. Nothing. I opened mine. Exactly the same. Daniel had convinced both of us that staying private was healthier. Now I understood why. Privacy wasn't protecting our relationship. It was protecting his lies. As we continued sorting through photographs, then something began bothering me. I flipped through one album, then another, then another. Finally, I asked, "Do you have anything older?" Sarah looked confused. What do you mean?" "These pictures." I spread several across the table. "They only go back about 5 years." She frowned. "No, there have to be older ones." We searched every shelf, every cabinet, every storage box. Nothing. Not a single family photograph older than 5 years. It was as if someone had erased the first half of their relationship. Sarah suddenly became very quiet. She stared at one picture of Daniel holding the children, then looked at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "When Daniel talked about his past, did he ever mention me?" "No. He barely talked about old relationships." She looked down at her hands. "He told me his first wife died." My heart stopped. "What?" Sarah nodded slowly. "He said it happened years ago. He never wanted to talk about it. He said losing her nearly destroyed him." I couldn't speak. She continued. "I always felt guilty asking questions. I thought I was reopening old wounds." I stared at her. My voice barely came out. "I'm very much alive." Sarah's face lost every bit of color. She actually grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "No," she whispered. "No." "Oh my God." She covered her mouth. "He's been lying to both of us." The room felt different after that. Not because we'd learned something new, because we'd finally understood how deep the deception went. Daniel hadn't simply hidden one relationship. He'd built two completely different lives, different stories, different histories, different versions of himself. I walked to the window and looked out across the lake. The water was perfectly still. How many times had I stood here believing this place was ours? How many times had Sarah done the same? I suddenly remembered something. The property records. If Daniel had been so careful. I wanted to know who actually owned this cabin. I opened the county property website on my phone, typed in the address. The page loaded. Owner, Cedar Ridge Holdings, LLC. I frowned. "That's strange." Sarah leaned over. "What? The cabin isn't in Daniel's name?" "It never was." She looked confused. "I thought his grandparents left it to him." "So did I." We searched the company. Nothing. No website, no phone number. Just a registered business address in another state. Neither of us had ever heard the name before. The cabin we'd both believed belonged to Daniel was owned by someone else entirely. Sarah slowly stood. "There might be paperwork." She walked toward Daniel's old desk in the corner of the living room. She pulled open the top drawer. Pens, receipts, utility bills, nothing unusual. The second drawer held maps and fishing licenses. Then she reached for the bottom drawer. Locked. She frowned. "That's odd." I've never seen this locked. She searched the desk. Finally, she found a tiny brass key taped underneath. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the drawer. Inside sat a black leather folder. She opened it, then froze. I walked beside her. Inside were 2 passports. Both belonged to Daniel. Same photograph, same date of birth, but different home addresses, different signatures. Neither of us said a word. Because in that moment, we realized we weren't looking at the life of a cheating husband anymore. We were looking at the life of a man who had become someone else. Emily didn't sleep that night, not because she was crying. She had already cried enough. Now she was thinking. The 2 passports sat on the coffee table between her and Sarah like something poisonous. Same man, same face, different signatures, different addresses, different lives. Emily realized something important. If they called Daniel now, he would lie again. So she stopped acting like a hurt wife and started acting like an investigator. The next morning, Emily drove back to the city. She didn't tell Daniel. She didn't answer his calls. She printed everything: bank statements, old emails, vacation receipts, property records, screenshots of texts, photos from Sarah's cabin, the 2 passports. Every strange thing that had once felt small now looked like part of a pattern. Daniel always used cash near the lake. Daniel always disappeared on the same weekends. Daniel always had a reason his phone died: client emergency, bad signal, long meeting. Every lie suddenly had a shape. Emily searched Cedar Ridge Holdings LLC for 3 hours. At first, nothing useful appeared. No website, no real office, just a mailing address in another state. Then she found tax documents linked to several properties. Not 1 cabin, not 2, 7. 7 vacation homes, all owned by Cedar Ridge Holdings, all in quiet towns, all near lakes or mountains, all places where a man could disappear for a weekend and no one would ask questions. Emily stared at the screen. Her hands went cold. This isn't just about Sarah, she whispered. The next day, Emily hired a private investigator named Marcus Reed. He was calm, direct, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. After looking through the documents, he said one thing: "Your husband isn't just hiding a second life." Emily looked up. "What is he hiding?" Marcus tapped the Cedar Ridge papers. "A system." 3 days later, Marcus called. "I found monthly payments." "To Sarah?" "No." Emily's stomach tightened. "To who?" "A woman named Linda Vale." Emily closed her eyes. Another woman. For one awful second, she thought Daniel had a third family. Marcus continued. "She's 74. Emily opened her eyes. "What?" "She's not a girlfriend. She's connected to Cedar Ridge Holdings." That made no sense until Marcus sent the file. Linda Vale had been listed as a caretaker on 3 properties, but she didn't live in any of them. Her bank account received money every month from Daniel, not huge amounts. Just enough to look normal, quiet, legal, hidden in plain sight. Then Marcus found the bigger truth. Cedar Ridge Holdings was connected to a businessman named Victor Hale. Luxury properties, shell companies, tax problems, fraud accusations, nothing proven, at least not yet. Marcus explained it simply. Victor buys properties through fake companies. Then he places families in them to make the homes look privately used, not commercially controlled. Emily felt sick. So Sarah was cover. And me. Marcus paused. "You may have been covered too." Emily looked at the stack of evidence on her table: the vacation home, the fake ownership, the changed locks, the passports. Daniel hadn't only betrayed her with another woman, he had used both women as pieces in someone else's financial scheme. Sarah came to Emily's apartment that evening. Emily showed her everything. Sarah read silently, then she covered her mouth. "My kids." Emily softened. "They're safe." Sarah shook her head. "No, you don't understand." She pointed to one document. "Daniel told me this house was ours. He said he was protecting us." Emily looked at her. "He told me the same thing." For the first time, they weren't 2 women fighting over one man. They were 2 women realizing the same man had built cages around them both. The following week, Marcus requested one more meeting. He arrived carrying a gray folder. His face was serious. I found something you need to see. Emily braced herself. Another property, another woman, another lie. Marcus opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. It showed Daniel standing beside an elderly woman outside a courthouse. Emily stared, then gave a confused smile. My mother? Marcus shook his head. No. Emily's smile disappeared. Then who is she? Marcus looked directly at her. That's Daniel's real wife. The room went silent. Sarah whispered, Real wife? Marcus nodded. Her name is Margaret Ellis. According to public records, Daniel married her 12 years before he married you. Emily couldn't breath. But Daniel and I have been married 11 years. I know. Marcus turned the page, and there's no record of divorce. Emily looked at Sarah. Sarah looked back at her. Everything they thought they knew collapsed at once. Daniel didn't have a second family. He didn't have a double life. He had built an entire false world, and they had only discovered one room of it. Emily and Sarah didn't confront Daniel immediately. That was the hardest part. Every instinct told Emily to call him, to scream, to demand answers, to ask how a man could sit across from her at breakfast. For 11 years, kiss her forehead before work, remember her coffee order, and still build an entire false life behind her back. But Marcus, the private investigator, said one thing that stopped her. Let him walk into the truth on his own. So they waited. They invited Daniel to the vacation house like nothing had changed. Sarah sent the message. Can you come by tonight? The kids miss you. Daniel replied within minutes. Of course. Be there by 7. Emily read the message twice. Then she placed her phone face down on the table. For the first time since all of this began, she wasn't shaking. She was ready. At exactly 7:04, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. Sarah's children were upstairs with the headphones and a movie. Marcus was parked down the road. 2 detectives waited in an unmarked car behind the trees. And inside the cabin, Emily sat on one side of the living room. Sarah sat on the other. Neither of them spoke. The front door opened. Daniel walked in smiling. Hey, I brought dinner. Then he stopped. His eyes moved from Sarah to Emily to the folder on the coffee table. His face turned white. Emily. She looked at him calmly. Hi, Daniel. He took one step back. Sarah's voice was quiet. Don't run. Daniel looked at her, then at the staircase. The kids? They're fine, Sarah said, and they're not part of this conversation. For a second, Daniel looked almost relieved. Then another car pulled into the driveway, then another. Marcus entered first. Behind him came 2 police detectives, and last, a thin older man in a gray suit stepped inside holding a leather briefcase. Daniel stared at him. Mr. Patel? Marcus glanced at Emily. Victor Hale's accountant. That was when Daniel understood. It was over. The truth came out slowly. Not in one dramatic confession. In documents, contracts, wire transfers, property records, false signatures, fake leases, 7 vacation homes, 4 shell companies, and dozens of people who had been used as cover. Victor Hale had built a quiet fraud network through properties like this one. Families were placed inside homes to make them appear privately occupied. Money moved through fake maintenance accounts. Daniel's role had started small. At least that was what he claimed. He said Victor trapped him with debt. He said he was scared. He said once he started lying, he didn't know how to stop. Emily listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question. Did anyone force you to marry me? Daniel lowered his head. No. Sarah asked, did anyone force you to tell me your first wife died? His face crumpled. No. Emily nodded slowly. That's the part you still don't understand. You may have been trapped by Victor, but you trapped us. Daniel started crying then, quietly, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a broken man sitting inside the house where all his lies had finally met each other. The investigation took months. Victor Hale was arrested first, then several associates. Daniel cooperated, but cooperation didn't erase what he had done. He was charged with financial fraud, document falsification, and identity-related offenses. At sentencing, he looked back once. Emily didn't look away, neither did Sarah. For years, he had lived by choosing silence. Now silence was all he had left. Sarah moved closer to her family. The children received support through a legal settlement tied to the properties. Emily started over in the city. She sold a house she had shared with Daniel, changed her number, kept only 3 things from that marriage: her dog, her books, and the lake photo she had once loved. Not because she missed him, because it reminded her that beautiful places can still hide ugly truths. 1 year later, Emily was happier than she had been in years. Not loud happy, not perfect happy, peaceful happy. The kind that comes from waking up without wondering what someone is hiding. She didn't talk about Daniel much anymore. When people asked if losing him was the hardest part, she always gave the same answer. The hardest part wasn't losing my husband. It was realizing, like, the man I loved never really existed. If you discovered your spouse had been living 2 completely different lives, would you confront them immediately or quietly gather evidence first?